Today I'm going to share with you how to fill your sketchbook with some easy and stress-free ideas that will make it natural for you to keep up with your art practice. I'll be sharing some beautiful, colorful pages that will hopefully inspire you to grab whatever paints you have and give them a try. Hi, I'm Paula. Welcome back to my channel. I'm a full-time artist and I create these videos to inspire you to make art for your own happiness. Let's get creative. I decided to tape a border around my page to begin, but before describing my process, let me just take a second to explain that these are not the regular watercolors I use. I have this new set because this was supposed to be a create art with anything type of video. So I went to my local art store and grabbed the cheapest watercolors they had, which were these at $2.90. Back at my studio, I got a closer look and they definitely look like school grade art supplies. They were not even sealed. So I opened the case and followed my impulse to touch them and they were sticky. I did not expect that. So immediately I thought these were going to give me trouble and be bad. But as soon as I started using them in my planned abstract landscape, I realized they were pretty pigmented and I could get them to be as little or as much saturated as I needed them to be. So that's why I changed the focus of this video and it's now about colorful ideas you can try on your sketchbook. The idea with this landscape was to create a color block page that would work even with less saturated colors. But around the time where I was applying the third color to my page, I noticed that the quality of the set was actually nice. Nice enough to use them similarly to what I always do and the way I enjoy the most. So I changed my plan. Now the plan is to use all the colors and enjoy them stress-free. So I filled the page and let the colors bleed into each other, letting them do their thing. Dried that first layer and then went back to polish everything a bit. Starting with the clouds, I'm not the best at painting clouds, but now that I was getting to know my paints, I was slowly getting them to look okay. Then it was time to define the landscape with more color on top, painting different stripes to give the mountains their shape. I kept going back to the clouds too. Making them darker definitely helped with them looking better. As I worked on building up color and depth on the landscape, I painted lots of long colorful lines and I added thinner lines as texture. Oh, and to help my clouds look better, I used the white watercolor on top, which I know is a crime for some serious watercolorists. White should be created by the unpainted areas and dark colors should be layered. But I'm not gonna let technique steal the joy of using watercolors for me. And after adding a few more lines and making other areas of the landscape darker, I got my tape off and here is my result. I really like it. I think the watercolors work perfectly. Of course, they are not as bright and pure, I guess, as the fancy watercolors I normally use, but I think they did a great job and now I have this super nice bright picture that would look amazing as wall art in a space. For the next colorful idea, I wanted to do something very fluid, so I started by painting 3 very sketchy flowers and then extending their petals with more colors. Super watered down color to allow all 3 flowers to mix. Once I was done with the petals, I added more pigment in the centers of the flowers for more definition and painted a few leaves around. When it dried, I thought I would use a purple acrylic marker to trace the pigment marks and the cauliflowers that form from the watercolor. I like to create contrast between the soft painting with the crisp lines on top. I went around all of my flowers, drawing very sketchy flowers, which I wasn't sold on. I mean, I draw these all the time, but I was not liking the result now. So after finishing the leaves, I thought I could make it better with more watercolor, and I started painting with a deep red, trying to add more value. This is how that dried, and honestly, I think it's so meh. I don't like it. To be okay with it, I'm just gonna categorize it as a quick sketch to play with color, but honestly, it's a fail for me. But because it is in my sketchbook where I experiment and have fun, it's okay. Moving on to the third colorful idea of the day, and because I was a little frustrated with the previous page, I decided to go for one of my favorite things. Painting soft, flowy lines with watercolor. I started with yellow and gradually moved to greens in an analog color combo, allowing colors to mix. With those first stripes fully dried, I thought I would try something different to what I usually do, and instead of adding another analog color next to the green while still wet, I would add a complementary color on top of everything once dried. So I painted new lines with purple on top. When that dried, I decided to use magenta next, but I don't know why I painted the line in this direction that looked off. I tried to fix it, but that didn't really work. So I thought I would try to make it work by adding more on top and painting another line. I was trying to create a focal point or something to fix this. Gotta tell you, at this point, I thought I totally ruined the page and that it was unsavable. I was already planning how to scratch this from the video during a tiny artistic tantrum. But I decided to listen to my own advice and push through. I kept adding more color, making this line thicker and trying to make it look like it's twisting. With everything dry, again, I reached for my acrylic markers to add to it and see if I could rescue it somehow. I started with white, but as soon as I started to draw, I didn't like it. So I went back on top with black. And then I used the same black marker to mimic the lines on the dried watercolor. When I was done drawing lines on the main twisty part, I thought maybe I could use the white on what was left to define both areas as different interacting objects. The white was again not working for me, but as I drew a thicker line, it occurred to me that maybe I could push back this area by making it less saturated. So I switched my marker for the white watercolor and I added a white wash on top of it all. I liked how the colors moved underneath, and with the white carrying them, they all became pastel lines. The other side of the main element only had pink, so I added more color next to it and then used the white on top so both sides would look the same. And done! I went from hating it to loving it. I really love the contrast it has now and the main element in the middle with the soft line behind. Of course, I'm pumped again, so I also enlarged this one to show you as large wall art. Oh, and if you're wondering how I do this, I have a video explaining how I go from my small sketchbook page to digital mockup to actual massive print on a wall. For my next idea, I taped the border on my page. I wasn't happy about the failed floral we started with, so I decided I was going to try again. Of course, I'm changing the idea a little bit, but I'm basically painting watered down flowers and then drawing lines on top again. The difference is that, as you can see, I'm painting really small flowers now, and then I'm connecting them by painting leaves. I'm making all of the elements touch, and I'm letting the watercolor bleed into each other, creating new color combos. On the parts of the page that have already dried and don't mix as easily, I tried matching the color of what I painted to what I loaded on my brush. This was one of those nice, easy, feel wonderful process where you have a repetitive action that just flows, and at the same time you get a bit creative by adding color and watching it mix. And it doesn't take long, so this one is great. I filled the page, let it dry, and then I started drawing on top with a 0.8 black pen. I'm again doing flowers connected with leaves, but I'm changing the style a bit. Now I'm going for sketchier flowers with double squiggly lines. I'm not aligning these with the ones underneath at all, and this looks great, keeping the idea as something nice and easy to do that yields a pretty result. And after pulling my tape, this is what I was left with. Definitely such an improvement from that first flower page I painted, and it's funny that it's basically the same idea, watered down flowers with lines on top, but I changed the scale and the shape. And now we have this beautiful result that I am going to show to you as wall art blown up in a wall, but I also wanted to show it to you applied on an object because I think it makes for such a beautiful pattern. Moving on to the next idea, of which I am somehow missing a little footage of me starting, sorry. I painted a red curvy line in the middle of the page, and I lost the part where I struggled to make it even with the round brush. And now I'm still struggling with this other brush. I got it to an acceptable point and started to look for a small flat brush to keep going. This was the only one I had. It's been through a lot, but I had to try it. And as soon as I start the orange line, it's like, yeah, this is what I needed. Works perfectly, but of course I smudged the paint with the back of my hand, but that's okay. Onward. I painted a pink line on the other side of the red, and then I remembered that these watercolors can be less transparent depending on how much I dilute their paste. So after finishing the pink line, I went back to make that orange darker and brighter. Then I painted a purple line and a yellow line on the opposite side of that. Honestly, I wanted to go for a rainbow on either side of the red line, but I quickly noticed I wasn't going to have space for that. That's why I'm creating the rainbow backwards. After the yellow line, I painted a green one, and then I was painting the blue. And I decided it would look better if I just filled the entirety of the background with blue. And now, seeing the footage, I completely regret that choice. I think it was better just as lines with a white background. But whatever, that's what I decided right then, and I balanced it by painting the background on the other side of the rainbow line green. I hated it. It looked like a toy car racetrack. No, I didn't like it. So I thought I could improve it with the white acrylic marker by adding some florals coming out of the white spaces I left. But that was not working, at least not enough for me to trust the process and continue, so I rushed to cover what I doodled by drawing a cloud around. The marker was not doing a good job here because it wasn't covering at all and it was picking up the pigment from the colors. So I switched it for acrylic paint and a brush. And I painted more clouds, which still needed 2 layers to look opaque. I mean, it improved a bit. It wasn't anything extraordinary, but I didn't hate it. It was kind of blah. So I don't know why in that moment I thought about drawing one of my characters behind one of the clouds. And I added Yolki. He is a little homeless bunny. If you want the backstory, you can watch this Clay Ideas video where I created him. I'll link it on the description. But since Yolki lost his home, he has been maintaining a positive attitude and he likes finding rainbows and hanging around them. So I thought it was fitting, and that was it. I just changed the tiny heart to white and I don't hate it anymore. I can see it as a notebook cover, but also as art for a children's room, right? Moving on, I still wanted to paint stuff that was colorful, but what about something a little bit more grown up? I love strawberries, so I thought it was a good idea to paint some. I started with the traditional red, but then I thought I would make it a little bit more fun by introducing other colors and, just like I did with the flowers, letting them bleed into each other. So I added orange, yellow, purple, and magenta. And I just kept filling the page with these rounded triangle shapes that of course represent the strawberries. Once it dried a bit, I started to add details to the strawberries like the leaves and the seeds using contrasting colors within the same color palette I'd already used. I was not going for realism, I just wanted to get the general characteristics of the fruit, so I'm adding shadows, seeds, and the leaves very deliberately. I really enjoyed this part of the process. I think you could do this with almost anything, like any fruit or any element, and it would be enjoyable too, and it wouldn't matter that it's not the right color or perfect shape. As I was doing this, I thought it would be nice to add some flowers from a strawberry plant around to break the composition a little bit. But instead of painting them solid, I only painted their outlines, trying to make them look like they were part of the bleed of the colors that I already had on the page. I really think the outlines of the flowers gave it a little something, making the composition better, and this is my result. I love it. Wouldn't this make a nice print for a restaurant or kitchen? And I also think maybe it would be lovely on a tea towel. For the next idea, I drew inspiration from that, I don't know if I should call it failed rainbow because now Yolki is there, but from that page. I thought, okay, clouds and a rainbow, let's paint a stylized, colorful cloud. For that, I first drew a bunch of circles on top of my page with pencil, trying to loosely form a cloud. Then I erased the lines for the circles so they were visible enough for me to be able to try to make decent circles, but not for the pencil to show through. I started to paint the circles with different colors, letting each color dry completely because I want all of these to be layered. At first, I painted all of the circles for which I created an outline, but as I filled them, I saw that I needed more circles, so I started to paint more freehand on top. That's why you're gonna see the circles getting worse and worse. The fun thing about this idea is that you can grab any color that calls you and it will still work wherever you place it. I was actually very happy with all the slight shade variations. About halfway done with the circles, I decided to mark the center of the page with some lines because I was going to paint lines going down to symbolize rain. Yeah, a little weird, but that's the idea. An abstract cloud pouring some limited and controlled rainbow rain. I started to paint some lines coming down from the circles, and after that, I alternated painting circles and lines to be able to play with colors. And I think what made this idea work were the smallest circles I painted on top since they connected the entire page. This was really fun to paint, and I think it's a great exercise to better understand how to layer watercolors and what color combos you can get from that. To finish, I erased the pencil guidelines, and here's my finished cloud. Such a depart from the page that gave me the idea, but I think it turned out great, and it could also be something cool you could hang in a children's room, but also in any other room you want. For the next idea, I also drew a pencil guideline since I know these are shapes that I've struggled with before. I tried these teardrop shapes once before and I thought the movement of the page was a complete fail. So this time I marked off the general direction I wanted the composition to have, marking the main curve and all of the other tear shapes I wanted to break out from it. I'm glad I used the pencil because I really did have to do it more than once to get it to where I liked it. When I was happy with it, I erased the lines that were mistakes and traced the correct ones with a red pencil. Then I erased everything so that I could barely see it and fill with watercolor. To fill them, I wanted to do a rainbow gradient from red down, so I started painting like that, slowly adding colors for them to mix and create the gradient all the way down to blue. Yeah, I miscalculated and I did not reach purple. When everything dried, it was looking so pale and uninteresting, so I decided to layer more color on top. It was easier to get the color where I wanted it once I had a background and I only had to loosely replicate it on top. It dried and it looked brighter but still pretty plain, and I don't know why I got the impulse to splatter some paint on it. In my eyes, this immediately improved it. I mean, now looking at the footage is a very subtle change, but right then it looked great. I let it dry, cleaned the desk, and started to add more lines on top. I made the lines much darker and random. I thought these would give the painting more direction and movement. This part was really nice. The first part felt more controlled and I needed more focus, but this felt free and a little bit more creative. Maybe not a jaw-dropping result, but it's something you can make to get a cute aesthetic result. For the next page, I'm going to get a reference from a magazine. I have a ton of El Italia magazines that I got when they invited me to Milan, and I'm just flipping through one to get a reference image. Of course, you can honestly use any photo because we are just getting a super loose reference from it. It could be anyone, a photo of yourself from your phone, whatever. Sketch something similar. As you can see, I'm only getting the general idea of the pose and I'm not even worrying too much about proportions. As soon as I had my drawing down, I closed the magazine and put it away because I wanted it to be a light, worry-free process without the stress of matching the reference. Then, just like I did before, I erased the pencil a bit, redrew the best lines with red, and then erased it all to get them as light as I could. I taped a border on the page because I wanted a crisp edge when I finished, and I started to fill everything, starting with the background. I chose the greenish color that I accidentally mixed on my watercolor lid. I think this would have gone better if I had chosen a color palette before starting and if I hadn't mixed colors. But I wasn't just really thinking that much about that. For the skin, I also used the terracotta that had formed on the lid of my palette from the mix of colors I used on the previous page. Dried it a bit there on the chin because it was bleeding into the other color and I wanted to fix that since I do not want that effect at all this time. The background was dry now, so I decided to bring more color by painting some blue stripes on top. Again, not going for perfect, I still wanted it to look painterly. It's been a while since I shared a sketchbook idea with a human figure in it, but I think someone asked for one, so here we are. I also painted the other side of the background and then went for her dress. I wanted a mustard color, but I don't know why I mixed this orange and used it. Maybe I was tired already. As it dried, I painted the hair. I wanted it to be color block on one side and only outlined on the other. Then I thought the dress could use some texture, so I started to paint red flowers on it. I thought this was going great, but after I was done painting the lips, I saw it and it was screaming Lilo from Lilo and Stitch to me, and suddenly I didn't like it anymore. So I thought about painting it purple on top, which was so silly because, of course, it was going to make a nasty brown. These are complementary colors. So then I just wet the area more and I picked up the color by blotting it with a paper towel. After it dried, it's a hot mess, but I went over it with purple, and of course now it's not a clean purple anymore, it's muddy, but I think it still works, so I painted more purple flowers on top. I removed the tape and this is the result. I honestly think it's too muddy and dark for this colorful video, but it is still color. And I really wanted to share how you can easily use a reference and create a portrait. And even with this color combo, let me show you how it works as a painting in a space. Let me know if you would like me to try this again with other colors or media. And that's it. That's all we painted today. I actually think these are all fun and beautiful. Yes, the watercolors are not as saturated as the ones I normally use, but I think for $3, there's barely a difference. Just to show you, if you really want to be creative and have fun, you can just go for it with whatever art supplies and create all of these pieces that are wonderful. Well, except for that one. We're not going to talk about that one, but it was still nice to make it. Okay, that's it from me today. Maybe you like watching this video next, and after that, I'll see you next Friday with a brand new video. Have the most wonderful day. Bye.